Hello and welcome to our webinar series, What's New at AmericanAncestors.org. My name is Ginevra Morse, Vice President of Education and Programming at American Ancestors and New England Historic Genealogical Society. I will be moderating today's event. We are a nonprofit organization supported by our members and donors. We provide resources and expertise in nearly all aspects of family history and are pleased to offer such programming for our members and friends around the world. And today's program is brought to you by the Brew Family Learning Center. So our presenter today is Don LeClair. Don works on our database collections and is responsible for the search experience on AmericanAncestors.org. He has 30 years of experience in the software industry, working in and leading engineering and product management teams. Don is a longtime member of American Ancestors and enjoys tracing his ancestors through New England and New York. So this webinar series is held every few months and reviews the most recent additions and changes to our award-winning website, AmericanAncestors.org. After a brief introduction to our website, Don will highlight our newest databases and additions to our digital library and archives. Then we'll discuss a few projects that are in progress and wrap up with questions from you, our listeners. At any point during the presentation, feel free to type your question into the questions panel to the right of your screen. We'll address those at the end. There is no handout for this presentation, but we are recording this event and starting tomorrow, you can easily go back and review any of the content from today's presentation on our website. So if you miss something on today's first listen, don't worry, you can always review the presentation later. All right, so without further ado, I will turn things over to Don.
Thank you, Ginevra, and thanks everyone for joining today. It's a pleasure to be able to talk to you about updates on AmericanAncestors.org, and the period we'll be covering is from January 1st through the end of March. So I want to help you understand what we have in our new databases and generally help you make the most out of your membership by keeping track of the new resources that become available. And if you think about the American Ancestors homepage, sort of the two menu areas we're going to focus on today will be the things under the search side of the menu, which relates to database, as well as the libraries, which is circled there in the middle, and the libraries where we have our digital library and archive that we mentioned in the agenda that we just went through a moment ago. So if you look under the search menu, that's where we can find the search for our databases. You can search all databases. The grouping there just below that is the category level searches. You can search within a category of records. And then you have the browse databases A to Z, which is a great way to find out what kind of databases we have, what information that we have online. For some additional context on what we have for databases, so the current information is we can now have 478 databases online. There's 1.42 billion searchable names in there. And then the pie chart that we're looking at gives you a perspective on what categories those databases belong in. So the large green slice on this pie chart is the databases that fall under the general heading of vital records, which will include public vital records as well as Bible records, that sort of a thing. The blue sections would be genealogies and biographies. That purple, I guess the darker purple color is census tax voter records, and then the more immediate purple, I guess I'm struggling with colors, sorry, is the court, land, and probate. And then the other one that we'll be talking about quite a bit today is journals and periodicals. So those are our categories and some of the databases that are available to you today. It's a lot of information, a lot of data that's available. If we look forward to, or page forward, then we can see sort of the distribution of how the databases align with geographies. So from the country perspective, you can see that the word cloud, the United States is primarily where our databases can be found. However, you can see there's quite a number of other countries for which we have resources available on American Ancestors as well. And then the pie chart behind that is a fan chart such as showing for those records that are in the United States, what's the distribution like within the United States. So you can see that We have quite a bit of coverage there, starting at the top center with New York and Pennsylvania, Massachusetts. So we have quite a range of records across the various states and localities in the United States available in AmericanAncestors.org. So today's presentation is not going to be focused on how to use search itself. I know you usually have some new people joining the call. Hopefully that's the case today. But if you're looking at pointers on how to use search, or how to use the search experience, we'd look under the Learn menu, and then you go down to the webinars and lectures section, and you can see highlighted there resources at AmericanAncestors.org. So if you were to click on that, then that will take you to information, a webinar that we give every year or two on how to search databases on American Ancestors. We just happened to have given the last update to that by my colleague Molly Rogers last year. So this is an excellent video tutorial to take you through how to use search on American Ancestors, how to avoid common problems, and take advantage of the full search experience. And then next to the webinar link, there's also a subject guide, essentially a short text version of how to take advantage of using the search experience on American Ancestors as well. So you can see those resources. You can see the picture of Molly. We have the categories of things, how to use search in terms of database search, category search, searching journals, using wildcards. If you're getting into names with interesting and variable spelling, then things like wildcards can be useful. So a lot of useful techniques related to searching, as well as printing and saving records. So if you're not familiar with American Ancestors, I definitely would suggest you take a look at some of these resources and see if they can help you out. And now, as far as keeping current with us, we have a blog called Database News, which is, you can see the URL at the bottom. It's dbnews.americanancestors.org. And whenever we post any kind of an update to our online databases, we put an entry in the blog. You can see the last one from March. So we had a new searchable parish update for our Catholic Records project. So you can either go to this website and take a look at what's coming out periodically. If you are interested in being notified proactively when something new happens, you can just enter your email address and you'll get a generated email every time we publish a new update on Database News. So it's a handy resource, and it'll help you stay current with what we're doing as it comes out. And as we get into the second half of the discussion, we'll be talking about the Digital Library and Archives. This was formerly known as the digital collections, but it's important to understand the digital library is separate from our databases. So it really is, and potentially for many of you, a resource that you haven't had the opportunity to take advantage of before. So it is, rather than being records focused, which was what our search experience is like, you're finding birth records or death records or whatever you happen to be looking for, the digital library is really focused on providing interesting manuscripts, research, letters, different kinds of information that are typically text searchable in those collections. So we'll be talking about updates to databases as well as the digital library in our presentation today. And if you were to click on the Digital Library and Archives button there, then you would see the home page. So it also has a direct URL, so if you want to go directly to it, you can go to digital.americanancestors.org. And at this point, there's about 750,000 pages of genealogies and diaries and case files. They're waiting for you to discover them out in the Digital Library and Archive. So that gives you the broad background. Let's now take a look at the database updates. So as I said before, we'll be covering the period of January through the end of March. So for this, I think you can always jump in when you're doing search and do search all databases, do what we call the advanced search to do that search. You can also go through browse databases A to Z. And I think this is sort of an underappreciated aspect of our website. So I'd like to start off there today. So with Browse Databases A to Z, you'll get, when you first arrive at this page, you would get a complete listing of all of the 478 databases are online. You can then, where it says search by database name with that red arrow there, you can key in all or part of a word to do searches. And that word or that actually searches more than just the database name. So in this case, I put in Roman as in Roman Catholic, but we will search the database descriptions, the database names, any of that sort of information to help you find one or more databases that match whatever it is you're looking for. On the results with the arrow on the right, you can see then visibly the set of databases that match the criteria you were asking for. So you can see the first two items that come up are the Massachusetts Roman Catholic Archdiocese of Boston, and that shows up twice because we have two databases in that collection. One of those is an image-only database, which is available to all members, and the other one is a indexed and searchable database of all of the records that we have from the Archdiocese of Boston. So, but you can use this to find any database, but just so happens in the example we used here, that this will be the first area of announcement that we're going to cover today. So the way we're doing things with the Archdiocese of Boston, we have a long-running project that's been running for 4 or 5 years now to index all of the Archdiocese of Boston records, which covers the Archdiocese of Boston covers pretty much eastern Massachusetts. If you happen to be familiar with Massachusetts, it's sort of like the 495 loop to the east, up to the northeast corner of the state. So we have been going through and digitizing all of the parish records and putting them online as we go, from their founding of the Catholic Church in the Boston area in 1789 up through and including the year 1920. So we'd originally focused on doing up through 1900, and then we had extended our agreement with the Archdiocese of Boston, so now we're going off through 1920. So as I said, we have two collections. The image only is available to anyone who wants to sign up as a guest member, which is free. You don't have to provide any money or credit card. You just put an email address, and then you can get access to this as a free database. So in the last 3 months, for the first 3 months of this year, we've added 32 new parishes, which have over 100 new volumes. And that gives us a grand total of 1,200 volumes of information, which is pretty remarkable, actually. It's quite a bit of information that's available to you. In a number of the volumes, we have indexes, printed indexes from the book that you can use to find a specific page, or you may be able to browse through by volume, by parish. So if you're looking at the volume pull down, which is in the center of the page, it'll start with the parish name, and then it'll list the individual book, for example, baptisms for a year range or marriages from a year range, and you can go through and browse through that information. If you're looking for more information about this project overall, then you can also in the saved webinars under the Learn menu, you can find a webinar that we gave specifically on the Catholic Records Project and what happened when we expanded our relationship there. So you can see here's the name of that particular webinar that we gave. It's the Archdiocese of Boston Catholic Records Project, and then we also have a link to a microsite, as we call it, on the technology side, which we have a small extension to American Ancestors to provide information about what this project is about, the kind of information that we have online, as well as the context for the founding of the Catholic Church in the early years in Boston. So a lot of useful information to help you there. Now, the second part of this project then is actually indexing all of those records and making them available. This, as you might expect, takes quite a bit more time because now we have to actually read every individual record on every one of those pages and capture that and put it online. So we're constantly rolling out updates to both the image-only and the searchable databases for this. So for the last 3 months, we've added 11 new parishes to the searchable collection, which has 154 new volumes, and total on the searchable side is crossed the 1,000 volume mark, which is kind of exciting for us, and we are at almost 12 million searchable names. So this is probably the largest single indexing project we've ever undertaken on American Ancestors, and certainly had a lot of positive feedback. Not least of which because, especially in the early days of the Catholic Church, there were quite a number of immigrants, and it's not uncommon that some of these people would have sacramental records with the church and not actually be appearing in some of the vital records. We've seen a number of those kinds of cases. So if you're looking for people that have been able to find them in the Massachusetts vital records, this could be a great place to go do a search. So in terms of what's indexed, this is the example of the search page, and we've done a very thorough job of indexing. So we'll have the first and last names of the person, the year. You can specify a year or year range. You can search for record types, and we will have each of the sacraments. So they would be baptisms, marriages, deaths, confirmations, first communions in some cases. And typically in the Catholic records, they'll record a baptism date and a birth date. So you'll often find both birth and baptism records for the people recorded in these books. The location would be the town that the parish was located in. You can also specifically search within a volume if you're trying to find somebody in a certain parish or a certain book. You can search there. And then we also have, where they're available, the ability to search by your family members, specifically mothers, fathers, spouses, and even witnesses. So oftentimes in both baptisms and marriages, the witnesses are recorded, and you may be able to find other relationships between your family and others by doing searches, including the family member information. So that's what you see for the search page itself. I think one of the things that's always good to remember if you're using American Ancestors is to page down, because there's more things there. So you can see here that we follow just below that search page. You can see search tips, which gives you information, pretty much what I just gave you in terms of the searchable fields. We typically will have 1 to 3 pages of just some sample images from the books, whatever books are in that particular database. And then we have a database description a few pages down that gives you information about that specific database. So this will appear on the database search page. Also, if you're looking at a record that comes from a database, you will see the same set of information below that record in search results. So one of the things that's good to keep in mind when you're using this particular database is that the official language of the Catholic Church is Latin, or has been Latin for certainly the earlier years of the Archdiocese. So typically, like if we look at this first entry on this page, it's Dionysium is the first name. We have done our best to translate the Latin into a relevant English first name. So you'd see Dionysium and Dennis, but sometimes Latin names can have variable translations. So it's a good thing to be aware of if you're taking a look in these records and you haven't looked at them before, that you'll see this kind of situation where there will be a couple of different variations of the name, one Latin or Latinized, and then the other one is our best guess on the English name that goes with it. So that makes it much more accessible type information. So with that kind of information, you can click down and then you can see this is, as I said, these records are typically captured in Latin. There are various forms in different parishes, but you have some cases where it's just free-form text, and the person has written, in this case, a marriage record in Latin, naming the two people that have been married, maybe with parent names, and that's what we have indexed in this. In some other parishes, and especially more recent parishes, things that have happened after the mid-1800s, they're often using pre-printed form-style books, so it's a little bit easier to read, but it's something just to be aware of if you're looking at these particular kinds of records. And you can, of course, with any of our databases, when you're looking at the image, you have the option of downloading or printing the page that you're looking at. So if you want to have that information for your records, you can take advantage of that. And that ability to download and print will apply to both the index-only version of this database as well as the searchable version. Now, one other new thing that we added this quarter, which we're pretty excited about, is Parish Maps. So I talked about the database description. So in the database description for the Archdiocese of Boston databases, we have a link to a parish boundary map. So oftentimes you'll see that parishes were created within neighborhoods in a town, so it's not just a single parish in a town. And then even though this map is from 1955, it's certainly a very helpful tool for looking at, if you see multiple parishes in a given town, trying to figure out what community or what neighborhoods were served by that parish. So to use this, you could simply click on that hyperlink of the parish boundary map, and that will take you outside of American Ancestors to this site that's hosted by the Archdiocese of Boston itself. So this is that homepage for the parish boundary map. They have a description. They actually talk about this idea of communities and how they, what were the the goals and approaches were to defining parishes as the Catholic population grew in New England through the the 1800s into the early 1900s. And if you just click on the map viewer, then that will take you through to an interactive map. So here I'll show you just a sample of a map. I've zoomed in on the area around Newton, Massachusetts. So Newton is, I think, an excellent example because I believe there are 13 different neighborhoods in Newton. I've highlighted 3 of those or 4 of those that appear on the map. So these are all Newton Highlands, Newton Upper Falls, Newton Lower Falls. Those are all separate parts of the town of Newton. And from the map itself, you can see different colors are highlighting different parishes overlaid over a modern day view of that town. So for example, if I clicked on that Newton Upper Falls area, then I would get the information about that parish, Mary Immaculate of the Lord's Parish, is the one that's highlighted in the box. If I clicked on another colored section of this map, I would find out the information about that parish. So we have the name of the parish. We'll also tell you what the address was of the parish, so you can zoom into that. So it's a really excellent utility for taking a look at any Catholic ancestors you might have in the Massachusetts area, and try to take a look at, if they're in a case like Newton where there's multiple different Catholic churches, this might help you to zoom in on which parish your ancestors may have come from, or vice versa. If you're finding your ancestors are in this area, you might be able to sort of see what part of the town they most likely lived in based on the church they attended to or the records that you found for them. So we're really very excited to have this new facility available to us, and hopefully people will get a lot of use out of that as we go forward. So the next area, we have a database that was announced just before the end of last year. We've extended our relationship with the Archdiocese of Boston, and then they have an organization called the Catholic Cemetery Association, which has records for about a little in the mid-20s numbers of Catholic cemeteries around eastern Massachusetts inside the Archdiocese of Boston. And so this project will probably take about a year to finish off. We had an initial release, as I said, last year. We added 13 new volumes to this with 2,500 pages, and we're currently up to 25,000 searchable names. So adding Andover and Beverly and Framingham and some others are coming. The picture there is actually taken just not that long ago when it was still a little bit cooler outside up at the Parish Cemetery in Salem. So actually happens Claire Vale, who's our marketing director here, or vice president of marketing here, who took that picture herself, and nice addition. So this will be something that you'll probably hear updates for the next couple of meetings as we go forward with our quarterly updates as we continue to build out and publish these records as well from the Catholic cemeteries. For the Catholics, for what's searchable or what's available to you on these databases, it's first and last name. Primarily in this case, we don't have relationship names available in the records, but you have years and record types. Record types will clearly include things like deaths and burials, but they'll also include records such as lot sales, and oftentimes in some of the recordings of these items will have both birth and death information associated. So you have different types of records types that you can search for. You can pick the town that they're in, and you can also select by individual volumes. And if you, once again, if you scroll down into the database description, a couple of things that are useful. One is it will tell you exactly which set of cemeteries we currently have available. You can see those are the ones that are bolded in the list here. And along with our parish maps for the boundaries of the parishes, we have an additional map capability that's been made available to us by the Archdiocese of Boston, which is cemetery maps. So if there's a cemetery map available, you can see the hyperlink in blue there, for example, next to Beverly for St. Mary's. You can click on the map link, and then that will take you down to a map view of Beverly, showing you where that particular cemetery is located. So if you're interested, you find some information, you want to go try to find the marker or the grave site for any of these records, then this map can certainly help you locate where that cemetery is, and hopefully find the location and be able to get you over there to do your additional on-the-ground research. So moving on to some other new databases that we have. In this quarter, we announced a new database, a study project titled The Scots-Irish Settlers from 1700 to 1850. So basically this is the Worcester, Massachusetts area, or really Worcester County probably is a more appropriate category. And this is information, a study project that was done about a combination of Scottish and Irish settlers that came into this area and settled. So if you're familiar with some of the other study projects that we've done, like early New England families, the typical approach is that there's a set of sketches, and that is not the exception with this case. So we have 21 families are in this database. There's about 200 pages of studies of sketches that are available, and about 12,000 searchable names. And a lovely woman by the name of Shirley Robinson Pizzafieri was working in the Worcester area and developed an interest in finding out more about these early settlers from Scotland and Ireland coming into the Worcester area, and started building out this study project. And we were very happy to bring that online for the first time at the beginning of the year. So if you have ancestry from some of these areas and settling in the Massachusetts, then this may be an excellent resource for you to go out and take a look at. Another new database we added is with an Episcopal church, and I talked about Newton earlier, so it's not a complete coincidence, but St. Mary's Episcopal Church came to us, and they had published a book about 20 some odd years ago about the cemetery at that particular church. So the church and its cemetery are on the National Register of Historical Places, and they opened the cemetery, I believe it was in 1815. The church was built in 1813. And this book provides some transcriptions and birth, death, and some level of family information for all the folks that are buried in this cemetery. It was pulled together and published as a book by, as I said, by NEHGS, as a matter of fact, in about the year 2000. And Beverly Herney, who's still available or still around, was managing that cemetery for the church, and had pulled together this information. We got it published as a book, and then they actually inquired if we would like to make it a database, and we were thrilled to do that. So this is information that's really not available anywhere else, and it's a really nicely published and indexed resource on information about folks that were buried in that particular cemetery. And they include some people that fought in the Revolution, and Ebenezer Stedman, who was one of those signers of the Petition Incorporation, was one of the first people buried in that cemetery as well. So a fun new addition, and we're really happy to have that added to our collection of unique databases on American ancestors. Another thing we've been doing over the last couple of years is some of our very early databases that were put up in the mid 1990s, or 1995, 1998 range, were relatively lightly indexed. Meaning, for example, they might only have the last name indexed and not the first name indexed, and a number of them did not have the original manuscript pages with them. So we're happy to announce this month a couple of cases where we've taken some of those older databases and revamped them, as I would say, adding images and extracting all of the information we can to make it more useful and accessible from a search experience. So there were two of these databases from Maine. They both happen to be related to marriage records. So one is the marriages performed by Reverend Enoch Fowler from 1840 to 1870. And the second one is from specifically to Skowhegan, Maine, with marriages performed by Eleazar Coburn. So between these two publications, there's about 1,000 new searchable names. And we're happy to have this enhanced index available to you today for doing some of those kind of early researches in the 19th century Maine. And we've done the same thing for 3 databases in Vermont. the three that we worked on in Vermont were Morgan, Vermont. So we have town records, starting with the early records in 1780, but actually running very recently into the 1930s. We have the Congregational Church or the East Parish in Rutland, Vermont, so church records, and then the records of Reverend George Bailey, who did a variety of baptisms and marriages primarily, but other records as well, covering the period from 1740 to 1902. So between these three databases, then we have another 190 pages, 10,000 searchable names. So dramatically enhanced searchability for these. So even though they're old databases, if you've been using advanced search in some of these databases, if they didn't have, for example, the first name index, you probably would not find them. And so now these kinds of things should come up with your search results, whether you search at the database level or you database specific level, or you search generically across databases using the advanced search functionality. One of the categories of databases we have is unique to American ancestors is scholarly journals. And usually the end of the year and the beginning of the following, or the very beginning part of the year is when most of these journals have finished their publications for a year. Our agreements for, we have about 20 of these, like a little over 20 of these, usually stipulate that we have a 5-year gap between when they publish their journal and when we can put it online. It's because they sell copies of those journals is one of the reasons for that. So for the new journal updates that we've added, we added volume 87 of American Genealogist, which actually covers 2 years. The Connecticut Nutmegger, which has a slightly longer term than some of the other ones, volume 46 from 2013. 2015 version of Essex Genealogist. Our own the NEHGR register, which we publish, of course, we do not wait for any number of years for that. We just wait till the year is complete. So we have the year 2000, which is the 174th volume, and then Rhode Island Roots. So we're very pleased to be able to work with these various institutions to bring these journals online. So just for this set, we added about 1,700 pages and 36,000 searchable names. So they're really an excellent resource. They're records that have been vetted and approved by people to make sure that they're really high quality information, and lots of excellent articles that can help you find troublesome problems that you need to research or roadblocks and help get you straightened out on those. So certainly it's a great thing to be looking at now that these have all been updated in the last 4 or 5 months. And I mentioned our study projects before. So when I talked about the Scots-Irish settlers, we have 3 ongoing study projects that we have the interesting perspective in that we publish information from the study projects in our database first, and then periodically we put out new volumes of those books so they get published into a book form. So the first one we can talk about is the early New England families from 1641 to 1700. So this study project is really based on the Tories' New England marriages to 1700, hence the year range for this. And so what they are is people that were covered in some cryptic way in the Tories' New England marriages, and we produce sketches on these individual families, and the way they're organized then is who were the couple or that got married and what year did they get married in. So you can see we added 5 new folks to the early New England families section here, including the Phelps, mostly in the Phelps family, or Phelps-related families. So these have all come available online, and then I have the most recent published version of the book is up at volume 2. If you're interested in finding out more about the book, you can see that at the bookstore on AmericanAncestors.org. Our next study project is the early Vermont settlers. And so this is a project by Scott Andrew Bartley looking at heads of families who lived in Vermont before the Revolutionary War. So we put out regular new sketches on this. He's been working somewhat geographically. So the newest sketches are all from Brattleboro, Vermont. And you can see there that we have additions for Bennett, Israel, Reuben, and Silas Field. So similar format to the other study projects, you'll have a sketch on a family, which will talk about that person when they settled, and usually as much as we can tell you about their children and that family. So get you started in terms of these early settlers into Vermont, in terms of their first generation of descendants below them. And the last of the three study projects we have updates for is the Western Massachusetts families in 1790. These ones are based on families that were enumerated in the 1790 census in what was then Berkshire and Hampshire counties, which now in today's world includes both Franklin and Hampden counties of Massachusetts. So it's the western half of Massachusetts roughly has been covered. So the new sketches there are Joshua Whiting of New Marlborough, Benjamin Griggs and Noah Church, and Matthew Williams. And we have the town that they were recorded in the 1790 census, and then where we have the name here, we've listed the name of the spouse. So once again, it's a similar situation where we have sketches by families, but the organizing principle behind this is that 1790 census. So one of the things that's a little bit different about Western Massachusetts families is that you can actually submit. And so we have Helen Ullman is the editor of these sketches, but rather than doing all of the writing herself, she also will accept contributions from other people. So if you've been doing research on early residents of Western Massachusetts in the 1790 timeframe, and you want to get in touch with her, we actually have in the page marked here at the bottom here in our ongoing study projects where you can contact her to submit something for the Western Massachusetts family sketch. So it's kind of fun if you're doing research in this area to be able to maybe get some of your own information published and help expand the scope of the study project and make it available to more people. So a lot of updates in the last 3 months, but that covers what we have in the database side. What I'm going to do now is transition over and we'll talk about what things have been added in the digital library and archive for the same period. So we talked about a little earlier about where you get information about doing search. There's also a webinar on digital library and archives. So I have a suspicion that a number of you haven't had a look at our digital libraries yet. So if you go underneath the learning resources and the watch section on the American Ancestors website, you can see this session called Navigating the Digital Library, presented by Sally Benny, who's excellent. She's the person who's the curator really of our digital collections side of things. And we just done a major upgrade last fall in terms of the software behind the digital library. And so this would be a great opportunity to learn more about how things were organized and how you can use the search function within the digital library against the various kinds of materials they have there. So to find your way through digital library, as I said at the very beginning of the show today, you'd look underneath the library and then you click digital book and manuscript collections. And when you select that, that will take you to essentially the home page for the digital library, which has its own URL that we talked about there. Now that's what can be deceptive, and sometimes people forget to page down, is that this is the top part of this page gives you a high-level description of what digital libraries are, and then talks about the categories. But if you page down, then you'll get in a description here of the 3 major repositories that are within the digital library and archives. So it's within this, we have on the left, we see the Wyner Family Jewish Heritage Center. So this is the contents of our Jewish Heritage Center. We have the Archdiocese and Avery Special Collections, which tends to be focused on the manuscripts that we have collected here at the library. And then on the right, the Research Library, which is the books and things that we have had in our physical library and how we're bringing those kinds of things online. So those are the 3 main repositories. So for walking through the updates today, what I do is you click here in the bottom right-hand corner. You can see that repositories building. You click through on that, and then that will take us to a list. So within those 3 repositories, there are a significant number of collections. So we look here at this page, we're seeing the collections of the Wyner Family Jewish Heritage Center. You can see the list of at least 24 different collections that are available in here, any one of which can be updated. The one we have, the big red arrow there, is for the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which we abbreviate HIAS. We talk about Jewish families that have been coming through the Boston port in their typically leaving Europe and coming to the United States. So we'll start from here. You'll notice at the bottom of the page that we'll be coming back to this page to look at collections from the research library as well as from the digital from the Stanton Avery collection. But if we click through on one of these collections, we click the HIAS as an example. Then what we'll have there is one of the major focus items we have at the GHC is these case files. So the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society was there to help people that were coming through and settling in America, coming from Europe typically. So in the last 3 months, we've added 819 new case files with over 9,300 pages of information, which is a pretty remarkable increase. To get access, you do have to request access. It's not charged, but it's available to you. There is actually a related database to this that's been published. We have a in the database side, we have something called the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society records from 1904 to 1929. So basically what happened is originally they kept very short record books with minimal information about incoming families, and they switched over around 1929 into this case file where there's significantly more information in the case files. So the early records, which are somewhat simple and brief, we've introduced this database. The new things are now available as the case files here on DLA. So if we page forward, then we'll see here, this is when you click through to that, the HIAS page, you can see information, first of all, specifically how you can request access to the collection, but you can see then you can start browsing through that by clicking the browse button. You can also see on the left panel there, it says recent additions, and this will be a general tool we can talk about that's available in the digital library to be able to browse through and see what's been added. So you also have a sort of a what's new perspective when you're in DLA. So if you were to browse into the database, I'll just give you a couple of examples for the kinds of, I said database, browsing into that collection, the kind of information you have is interestingly varied and valuable. So here's a sample here of a card that was collected from a woman by the name of Yenta Spock, who came, tells you what ship they came in, where they came from. In her case, she came on the ship from Russia in 1904, and you can see here she's looking to join her husband Moses, who's already arrived and is living in Salem. So interesting information, gives you great information about where someone came from and what their final destination was, because not everyone is settling directly in the Boston area. In the next page, we can see we have, this is essentially the form that you'd have to fill out for prerequisite for becoming naturalized in the United States. So here we have even more information. In the case, this one we're looking at one for Rose Herlichman. We have information about her parents' names, when she departed Europe, where she used to live in Europe, and her birthplace. This could be really incredibly helpful information if you're doing research on your immigrant Jewish ancestors and that kind of thing. It's available in the digital library and archives. And then there's also sort of general correspondence. And here's a letter from a guy by the name of Wolf Hochbaum, and he's searching for his uncle Maurice Goodman. So it looks like it. You can see a note at the bottom. He's a German refugee. He's in bad financial condition and trying to track down his uncle to see if he can get some help getting settled here in the U.S. So anyway, that's the kind of information you can see in this collection of things in the digital in the GHC side of digital archives, and really valuable and helpful for doing family research. We have some additional things that were added during the last 3 months. So one of those was correspondence. We just showed sort of a posting or a short bit of correspondence. We also have the letters of Mary Antine, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly, but hopefully, who is an author and an immigration rights activist. She was born in Russia and migrated to Boston at the age of 17 in the 1890s. And anyway, she published books about this, her book about her experience in immigrating to the U.S., and you have interesting information and historical perspective there. Then another collection on the Jewish Tuberculosis Sanatorium of New England, which was located in Rutland, Massachusetts. And this is a collection that has brochures about the sanatorium, news clippings, records of patients who were treated there from 1928 to 1949. It's available with the access request. And then the other one is 54 beautiful glass plate negatives from the Bureau of Jewish Education in Boston, Mass. So it has some views of historic buildings in Boston done on glass plates, and it's really nice. This is a sample of one of them right here on the page that you're seeing in Boston. So anyway, those are the new additions on the Wyner family at GHC. And if you're interested in any of these kinds of categories, I'd sort of take a look at Digital Library to follow up on it. So now if we scroll down in that list of repositories, we'll look at the ones from the R. Stanton Avery Special Collections. So I said these are the ones that typically come from our manuscripts. You can see the major list of categories that are within that idea of special collections. And the one that I've selected here, or highlighted with the red arrow, is the Riobard or Dwyer papers. So that's when we had a significant update this quarter, and we'll start with that one first. So Mr. Dwyer was an avid researcher on the Beara Peninsula in Ireland. This is in southwestern Ireland, if you were to be looking at a map. And so he'd collected quite an extensive set of information. He actually published a 3-volume work, which is almost all available. We're partway through volume 3, I believe, on the database. It's called the Annals of Beara, Ireland, the Annals of Beara. So that one, we're still working on that, but what we added today was 48 folders of his research notes, additional information. So this collection is now complete. We've been working on this for quite some time, and that is all available. You can see when you click through, you see the description. You have a definition on the right-hand side of what's in that collection, and then you can see recent additions in terms of what's been put online, typically by town and or family on that page. And here's just a little more information. If you're looking at browsing through, you can see lists of the parishes that he'd been doing his research in. If you're interested in searching for specific names, you'll see on that bottom left, there's subject information on family names, which can help you to navigate through his materials to potentially find some family of particular interest. So if you have ancestors or trying to do research on Irish immigrants coming from the southwestern side of Ireland, this could be potentially a very helpful resource for you. And then here is a specific example under Tulig. You can see this is actual rather colorful notes that he has about the family that from his notebook. So you can see you could be navigating through that notebook. On the right-hand side, you have essentially the table of contents. On the left-hand side, you have the actual notebook images that we have digitized and made available for you. Okay, so that was what we have added in the Dwyer papers. Some additional things we have added is in the category of family registers and Bible records. There's quite a number of additions, 61 new family registers. So one of the valuable things we've had in our manuscript collection for some time now have been a variety of donated or acquired Bible records. And you can see an example here of one of those pages from the Joseph Dayton Price family. And we just listed just a few of them here. Obviously, it was 61. I didn't want to take you through every single item, but give you an idea of some of the beautiful Bible pages we have with often family information associated with them. Just as a reminder, I talked about the recent additions being on the left. So if you click on any one of these categories, so here I'm just clicked on the category of or collection of family registers and Bible records, you see the recent additions, and that will always show you the most recent information first. And if you can browse down, I have a down arrow just meaning that you can indeed browse forward to see what else has been added in this. So it's a way to always be able to look within any of these items in the digital library, what's been added recently and most recently, which may help you once you started looking here on a recurring basis, that you can maybe focus on what's new. There is, of course, we're not going into it in this session, but there are search capabilities as well. So you can use search terms to find items within the digital library and archive. So the last section we're going to talk about in terms of updates is collections from the research library. So we have updates through both the family history books and local history books to talk about today. So if we click through on the family history editions, we added a total of 9 family histories. They include the Lincoln family, the Matthews and Greer families, and Richard Keyes and Mary Bailey. So 3 books there on terms of family histories have been digitized, that are listed here, that are available to you online. And then if we page forward on the local history editions, we have 3 items that were added there. So we have from Weymouth, Massachusetts, the semi-centennial, the 50-year anniversary of the Baptist Church there, 100th anniversary of the First Congregational Church in Canandaigua, New York, and then the Callicoon Historian, which provides interesting information about the Delaware Valley and its history. So it covers from, I think, early settler days up to the 1800s as far as historic events or historical events in the Delaware River Valley. So those have also been added to the collections. So that takes the database updates. I would like to just briefly comment that one of the great resources we have still available I know many of us are still working from home. We're spending a lot of time at home due to the pandemic, but there are databases that formerly were only available to you in the library that you can access from home. And so if you want to find those, you could go back to the search menu on American Ancestors and see where it says Special Interest Databases. That's highlighted there with the red arrow next to it. And if you click through to that, if you're logged into American Ancestors, I've taken a screenshot of what happens there. These are the list of databases that are available to you from home. These won't last forever. As I said, it is temporary access. However, some pretty significant and useful databases include Fold 3. If you're not familiar with Fold 3, they have military records from the Revolution up through relatively recent times, and newspapers.com, which has records from something like 19,000 pages or 19,000 different newspapers with nearly 200 million pages of newspapers. So all of these can be useful, but those are a couple of the things that are available to you, and you might want to take advantage of that before things get back to normal and you have to be in the library to take advantage of those. So that's the news on the updates. I do want to talk briefly about projects we have coming, one in particular. So today we're going to talk about one where we're looking for volunteers, and that is a project to extend a database we have that's called Vital Records from the NEHGS Register. So for the register, we have 2 databases. One is just the register database, which I talked about earlier in the journal updates, and that's just registered, that's indexed by first and last name. The database called the Vital Records from the NEHGS Register is a detailed re-indexing of that, capturing actual genealogical records / events from all of the text of the register. So if you've been aware, we've been publishing the register for 175 years, or this is the 175th year. It has a tremendous amount of information in there: family histories, local and town records, probate files, quite a variety of different things. So we're looking at people who can read this kind of print and then be able to help us with the indexing as we go through and re-index this database. We've gone through the first 13 volumes already, and we just want to continue to work our way through from back to front and provide detailed indexing. So if you're curious about this, this is a screenshot of essentially what's required. You can do this from anywhere. You can work from home. You can spend a few hours a month or more, whatever you'd like to do. But basically, we would provide you with a set of images. The screenshot I'm showing here, we're showing handwritten images, but we would show for the register, we would be showing you register pages. And then basically you'd get instructions to capture record type information into an Excel spreadsheet, which you see on the right-hand side of the page. very straightforward, and we're happy to have anybody get involved who wants to, even just a few hours a month. We're happy to have your assistance to get this done. Volunteers do virtually all of the indexing we do. So I think currently have about 150 or 130 people doing indexing for us, and we're always anxious to have more. There's no shortage of things to do. So we'd be happy to have your help if you're so inclined. The contact for this will be Rachel Adams. You can also send me a note personally if you'd like to. So thank you for attending today. We'd like you to stay in touch. So if you want to see what's happening, you can look at the blog, dbnews.americanancestors.org. That'll give you updates on all of our database updates. The American Ancestors Weekly Genealogist, we also provide information about our updates in the Weekly Genealogist. And as always, you can take a look at Vita Brevis, but most importantly, you can email us at webmaster@nehgs.org. So if you have any questions on content, you find any errors, please reach out to us. We're happy to stay in touch with you and work with you.
All right. Well, thank you, Don. So before we get to your questions, I wanted to let everyone know about a special offer throughout the month of April, of course, to access all of our 478 databases, 1.4 billion searchable names on American ancestors, and also to receive special discounts on our services and products, receive our quarterly magazine and scholarly journal, and much, much more. You do have to be a member of American Ancestors. And so throughout the end of April, you can receive $20 off a new American Ancestors membership using the code April0421. The offer expires on April 30th of this year, and it's not valid on current membership renewals, but certainly if you know someone, if you are kind of new to American Ancestors or you know someone who may benefit from membership, certainly let them know about this great benefit or this great sale, spring sale. Your membership helps support the scholarship, programming, and staff of our nonprofit organization. So thank you for your consideration. All right, so let's get to your questions. Go ahead and ask your question, type it into the questions panel to the right of your screen, and we'll try to get through as many as we can. So Jackie asks, if you search as a guest user, will the databases that require NEHGS membership show up in the results?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So by default, if you go in and you're doing a search, we will include results from all databases, whether they're available to guest members or not. So what you can do, if you're using the advanced search screen to filter your results, you can click on the only free databases, and that will restrict you to the things that your membership will get access to you. If you're looking at the database specific search, then you probably want to check to see is that database free or not, which you can do by the browse databases A to Z that I talked about a couple times earlier. You can filter that list by database type, which would include the guest member or the free databases. So there's a couple different ways you can navigate to avoid that. And if you do run into them, then it'll just tell you that you have to remember to see this, and you can refine your query to take that out, or you can always join up.
And let's see, another question. Ellen asks, do you foresee having parish records from Worcester County, Massachusetts?
We would love to. At this point, we do not have, our agreement is with the Archdiocese of Boston for doing sacramental records. Worcester, while it reports into Boston, is a separate diocese. It's the Worcester Diocese. So right at the moment, we have not reached an agreement with any of the other dioceses in the Boston area, but we've had some discussions, and hopefully at some point we'll be able to announce an even broader agreement to bring in some new some new dioceses, including Worcester.
All right, and Jeffrey asks, so how do you access the study project materials such as the early Vermont families?
So if you want to look at the early Vermont it's early Vermont settlers, I believe. You can go to the database specific search page, and you can then search that database, which would include all of the available sketches. You could also, from the database search page, you can click to browse through individual sketches. Each sketch is a volume in that database. You use the pull down. You could say, oh, I want to look at this volume and just go read it. And of course, if you're interested in owning printed versions of that, you can go to the store to acquire one of the volumes that have been printed and is available in hard copy.
And Sandy asks if you can explain indexing.
Sure, thanks, Sandy. So I guess I went pretty quickly through that, but when we talk about when people get involved with helping us index, then essentially we create what we would call records, what you would see as a record when you do a search. So for example, if you see a birth record in early New England, early Vermont families, then it might have a person's name. It may have the names of their parents and a year and a place. That would be a record, essentially. So what indexing involves in that project we're talking about with reindexing the NEHGS register is you would get a set of pages. You would essentially read the article you've been assigned to, and then to extract that information that's probably in a textual form into individual records. So if you're looking at a family history, you're looking at Elizabeth Warren, and you're looking at her birth, marriage, and death information, then you would read that information, capture that into a spreadsheet style where you have one row per record, and that person's name, dates, locations, and then we take that information and then we do our behind-the-scenes magic to make that index available to people who are searching our website. So this is the way we build pretty much all of our database content that's searchable at American Ancestors, is people key that into a spreadsheet style, and then we run some programs to make that available and searchable on the website.
All right. Let's see. Do you know, Tom, or we have a question. Tom asks, you mentioned a new local history, I believe, that was added to the digital library. I think it was Callicoon. I'm probably pronouncing that incorrectly.
Probably was too, yes. The Callicoon historian.
Yeah, do you know if that includes Pennsylvania records, or do you know much more about that specific resource?
What I understand is that it covers the general Delaware River Valley, so it touches on parts of, I believe, New Jersey, New York, and Pennsylvania that would fall under that general area. So yes, it would include some Pennsylvania as well as New York and New Jersey.
Great. Well, certainly worth a look. So thank you again, Don, for highlighting some of the new resources, databases, digital collections available on AmericanAncestors.org. If we didn't get to your question, I know that we're just at time now. If we didn't get to your question, or as maybe you start to look at these resources and search them, you can always reach out to webmaster@nehgs.org, and I will include that email in my follow-up email to you later today. And of course, if you'd like more hands-on help with your research, you can consider hiring our research services team by contacting the email that you see there on your screen, research@nehgs.org. And we've also recently expanded our free open to the public chat service. You can chat with a genealogist Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, this service is open to everyone, and it can be accessed at AmericanAncestors.org/chat. And I will be including all of that information, as well as a link to the recording of this broadcast, in my follow-up email to you later today. So thank you again for joining us. As you leave the event, you'll have the opportunity to fill out a survey and give us your feedback. As we continue to expand our webinars and online offerings, any and all feedback is extremely helpful and appreciated. This free webinar was made possible by the generous support of members and friends around the world. Please consider making a gift to American Ancestors to keep these programs free and to create more free programs for you and for others. And if you'd like to access more how-to resources or learn about upcoming online educational programs, please visit our online learning center at americanancestors.org/education. Stay safe, stay healthy, and I hope to see you at our online programs in the future. Goodbye for now.